just promised our audience that one of the things we would accomplish today is cut through the hype. And every company today, if they've not already done so, they're in the process of rebranding themselves as an AI company. I mean, in every single industry you see it. I'm curious if you could start by kind of differentiating how you think about AI versus what's come before, predictive analytics, data analytics, kind of what's the best way, do you think, for people to frame what AI is and what it is not? Pedro, do you mind starting?
Sure. AI is a moving target. It used to be that doing arithmetic was considered something that required high intelligence, but these days computers do it very easily. We usually think of in the field of AI as doing the things that humans do better, but the things that humans do better keep changing. And the thing to bear in mind is that, so there's a lot of AI already in the world today. There's also, these days, because of the hype, a lot of things being called AI that really aren't, right? So when you see the label AI, the first thing that you want to think about is, how much AI is this? How much intelligence does it really require?
Is there an easy test, do you think? Or does
there is no easy test, but there are many sub-tests, right? AI is many different things. It's planning and decision-making, it's learning, it's vision and speech understanding. And in each one of those areas, you can see how far along we are. And another aspect of the hype is that the companies that sell this will often be very optimistic about how far along they are and how easy these things are to use. So one thing to always bear in mind when you're looking at AI claims is distinguish the demo from what can actually be done on a sustained basis. The demo inevitably always looks better.
Okay.
So it's good to keep that in mind.
Fiona?
To your point around sort of AI being around for a long time and really just sort of an enhanced computing. So a lot of it is, now that we have a lot of data and the power to be able to compute, like what are the more interesting things you can think about, right? So if you think about pricing, yes, a human could look at things and price, but the algorithms could do that better. Right? So it's things like that you can, matching, classification, those are all things that now that we have the data and the compute and the algos to be able to do that, I think that's where the enhanced computing comes in, right? But to your point, it's been around for a while. It's just that now that we are able to kind of take advantage of it more.
Okay. And Basque, anything you want to add?
So 30 years ago, I met my girlfriend in an AI class when I was doing my master's. The only reason I paid attention to that was because she was there. The thing we remembered, Pedro was dead right, is at that time, the first argument we had was we couldn't write an algorithm that could differentiate between Larry Bird and Larry the Bird. We could not write it. So we had the first argument. We could not write chess games because the compute was not there. So if you could write a computer that played chess games, it was defined as AI. And all the semantics that you were trying to do was AI. So now, whenever all you're telling me that this is the year of AI, time of AI, so I feel like I don't know something here. I'm here to learn, to say what has happened that's dramatically different now. So the definition I have is things that are outside the realm of computing right now is how I think of AI. So the minute you start playing chess games, every kid can write a game to play chess. It's not AI anymore. So you have to kind of push yourself. The difference that we have, what we feel is the amount of data and compute that we were able to get 30 years ago was very minimal. So now I can track you for, if you have a self-driving car 30 years ago, I could track you on 30 seconds. Then I have to make a decision on what is self-driving, how you drive, whether you change gears or not change gears. But now I can follow you for 6 months. And in 6 months, I can very easily tell you how you drive. How many times you break the speed, where you don't stop on stop signs, how bad you're driving in the mornings. So I think that what has changed is a lot more of compute capacity and data. And then the minute we do something today, you won't be calling it AI tomorrow.
But isn't that part of the problem? Because it ultimately, for example, like voice speakers do use AI, but maybe because they're capable of it and we see it today, people stop thinking about it as AI. So that doesn't change the reality of it. It just it's a reflection of our vision of what AI is or should be, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think keeps on like voice recognition was AI, that you can talk like a human being. Image recognition was AI. The fact that it was very difficult to recognize a human face. You wouldn't call this AI right now necessarily. So you need to push yourself beyond. And more the computers can look and feel and act like a human. That becomes the definition of AI. I think computers actually are better than humans in better than average humans. Not these two, but better than me in a lot of a lot of ways. So that is not a good definition either. Right?
Pedro, did you?
We complain in the field that as soon as we can do something, then it's no longer AI, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, this is, I think, to your point, right? I think what's ultimately going to happen is that everything around us is going to be intelligent. And we're just going to not notice it. We're not even going to consider it intelligent. We're just going to consider it normal. A field of technology has succeeded when it's no longer visible, by which standard the AI is now at its point of maximum failure.
What's the right analogy for AI, do you think? We hear some really grandiose ones. So Andrew Ng has compared it to electricity. Sundar Pichai from Google compares it to fire and electricity, but says it will be more profound. What's the right, is this just the next wave of computing? What would be the right analogy to think about how extraordinary AI's impact is going to be?
Yeah, I think with the electricity, if you think about it, it's utility and ubiquity, right? And I think that's where AI is going. It is going to be like plumbing, right? And you're going to be able to use it. And then the other part is just this problems that it can solve. And it's not just one particular set of problems. Again, because it's plumbing, you can do it to solve existing problems that you have, and also potentially new frontiers, right, that it could break with the technology that it is. So really, something like and I think you mentioned also being on tap, right? So it really is. It's going to be underlying. You're not really going to think about it anymore. That's just going to be the utility of it, right? And what different problems, how you can use it to solve a whole myriad of different problems.
Are you internally in your university or at Dell, is there a kind of an analogy that a way to frame this?
Yeah, so we, what we have to be careful is that we don't call this the year of AI, and next year we forget that we've come up with something else. Because a few months ago, IoT was the thing. And now we're talking AI. In a few years, it looks like a lot of the data scientists, people who are doing data reporting call themselves data scientists and big data. And then some of the big data, now we're calling AI. So what happens, is big data dead then? So I think some of it is evolution. So what we have to make sure, the computers are at this critical stage right now where you can do even more interesting things that we couldn't do last year. For example, predictive analytics is something that we use in Dell. So we have engineered all our, we're engineering all our things we make to actually call home, with the customer's request. And we're gathering a lot of data and information about when can it fail, actually. And we can actually ship you the replacement part before it fails. It's sitting in your dock. And that's a fabulous customer service for people. It can also be freaky, so you have to do it with the customer in mind. But it's a nice thing if you can say, hey, I've already shipped you this because it's about 4 years, and here are the characteristics we've seen, and this drive is about to fail. That's pretty good. And then some predictive analysis we're looking at is we can predict with a good probability when our high potential people are going to quit.
Oh, really? How do you do that?
See, if I explain to you, it's not AI, because it becomes an algorithm.
That's not fair. No one likes black boxes.
Every time I've explained this thing, it's, that's not AI, that's really simple. Well, it is AI.
Well, I think your employees might not like hearing it. But
yeah.
Do you look at sentiment in terms like word diction in email? Or
you can look at diction, the things they make in social posts, LinkedIn updates. And you can even look at the manager sentiments. So there are 5 or 6 things you go, and then you do this machine learning. You learn and learn and learn, and then come back and say probability is pretty high that this high part you have is going to leave. So you need to reach out to this person. A lot of question calls to HR about salary and when does my share options. See, now I shouldn't explain, and now you guys are thinking I'm not as smart as I used to be. So this is why a magician should never explain his magic.
But I think it's one of those really interesting things, because I think people think of AI as this extraordinary high-octane force, when actually a lot of the applications are more familiar back office, so applying it to AI to finance, to HR, to supply chain management, to change
This is a great point, actually. Most of the impact of AI is in the low visibility applications. I've actually heard, there's a colleague of mine, Eric Siegel, who says, AI is like an army of ants. There's all these applications, each of which is only an ant. But when you have 1 million of them, that's actually where the bulk, people worry about like human-like AI doing things that are very, exciting, but also maybe scary at the same time. But 99% of the impact of AI is in doing all these things throughout the enterprise that maybe individually they're not that impressive, but they really add up to a lot of value.
And how do you think that companies are going to differentiate their AI strategy? So if this basically becomes table stakes as a way, one needs to employ AI in financial planning or customer service or HR in order to be a efficient, productive, profitable company, how is one going to differentiate themselves in terms of corporate strategy? Because ultimately, isn't this going to become extremely commonplace?
Because AI never works on its own. Right? So every company is going to apply AI to the thing that it is best at, to become better at it than its competitors. So generic AI, maybe there'll be some companies that provide it, the Googles and IBMs and Microsofts of this world. But every company, what it wants to do is use AI with its own knowledge, with its own expertise, with its own data that others don't have access to do something better.
Okay, so Fiona, I wanted to ask you about AI's applications in e-commerce. Amazon has gotten a ton of press for being early to invest in AI. Again, there's the question of timing and then differentiation. So if you think about how Amazon is approaching AI, how do you think that Walmart is thinking about it differently or similarly?
Yeah, I think in some ways similarly. I think certainly if you look at it from a website perspective, right, the personalization, product recommendations, product search, quite sort of similar applications of AI and machine learning, especially product classification. How do you have so many millions of products, how do you classify it in a much more easy way, right, than having humans kind of classify it. And then certainly, in supply chain, different things that you can do there with machine learning. And so some of it is similar. I think the way where it's a little bit different for us is also looking at the fact that we have 4,500 stores in the US, right? And we've got 1.4 million associates that are there to serve our customers as well, right? So how do you incorporate that part, whether it's bringing in the offline data as well to match up what we have online, and we have sort of a backbone, a customer backbone that we have where we're bringing in the data from our offline customers, so people going to the stores, right? So if you think about the 4,500 stores, and we've got 150 million shoppers every week that shop us in our stores. Every transaction, every customer till transaction that is happening there gets fed in, right? And so we're using that, we're trying to match that with what they're doing online and being able to create sort of a very personalized experience that you can see on their website that says, for example, these are the things that you've bought and we think you'll be, again, using predictive analytics, be most likely to buy. So just showing you those. So from a convenience standpoint, it's like, oh, I didn't even have to think about that. Walmart knows what I bought in the stores, what I bought online, and based on the purchase cycle and when I last purchased it, these are things that are not going to show up, and just sort of asking, hey, look, these are things perhaps that you want to reorder. Right, so kind of looking at it that way, and sort of, again, I think for us it's really taking advantage and incorporating everything that we have in the stores as well as online. And again, the other part is the 1.4 million associates, is how do we enable some of the things that computers or robots and artificial intelligence does best, and how do we leverage the fact that we have the humanity of 1.4 million associates to serve our customers, right? So looking at potentially having robots automate certain tasks like, image processing, going down the aisles and figuring out how many cans of Campbell's soup there is available for the customer to buy, and then dispatching the associate as necessary to the most strategic places, right, to go and actually stock the shelves. Because the robots at this point don't do that well, but they can do the image processing, the counting of the cans really well, right? So how do you match up sort of what a robot can do well with what the human can do well, and freeing up time? Because a lot of it's, again, wanting to make sure that we have a, delightful experience for our customers, and you can have our associates really focus on that, and sort of some of the mundane tasks, repetitive tasks, having the robots do that.
And are you using AI, because you're obviously a huge employer, are you using AI, like Bask was talking about, in hiring decisions, predicting employee churn, guiding people in the physical space to do tasks more effectively?
Yeah, I think those are all things that we're looking at. So I think certainly a lot of it, to your point, again, is that the prevalence of the data. And humans and probably HR business partners have been doing this, right? It's just that, now that you have algorithms that can do it, it's just you can do it to everybody, and you don't have to have someone just sitting there and looking at, these are the different possible things, and making sort of intuitive guesses. And it's the same thing even for our merchants, right? For them to say, with a lot of algorithms, we can do pricing for them, and they just have to say, hey, look, do I want to optimize for profit margin? Do I want to optimize for GMV sales? And the algos can come up with those numbers. So in the old days, I mean, the merchants would, right? They could come up with that. They would look at the data, bring in all Excel spreadsheets, and they'd figure that out, with some intuition. But it's a similar kind of processing. It's just the algos can do that, better and more quickly, and frees them up to go worry about, hey, look, what is the coolest new thing that I can go buy that our customers will be interested in?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So.
One thing that I think every company is grappling with is hiring the appropriate number of talented people to help them, both on a strategic level and then just in terms of kind of the grunt work of thinking about designing AI-based systems. How, in your view, how are you overcoming that for Bhaskar and Fiona? And then, Pedro, how long will it take from a supply standpoint for universities to be producing enough talented machine learning experts? So let's start on the supply side, Pedro.
The supply side is overwhelmed by the demand.
Yes.
There's a perverse thing that's, well, first of all, it's really great when suddenly an area of research explodes in terms of practical relevance, and then a lot of people move to industry. We're seeing that, and this is good. But the problem is, I've been seeing this for 20 years, actually. The demand for machine learning in particular is always ahead of the supply. And in fact, we are trying to increase the supply, but the demand is increasing even faster. And what is happening right now is that, unfortunately, the professors are going to industry, so there are actually fewer students being trained.
Right.
So in the short term, what is happening is great, but in a way, we're eating our own seed corn. Right? So this is actually certainly a cause for worry. And one way to solve this problem is that today, to do AI, it really does take people with PhDs. I mean, there's doing data science where you build models, and you can do that with a certain amount of training. But to do the kind of AI that gives you an edge, it takes people with a PhD, and there are only so many. And the ramp up isn't, there's no explosion in the supply, about to happen. So I think part of how we're going to solve this problem is by making the AI mature enough that actually it doesn't take people with PhDs to do it anymore. And really, the ideal of this AI on tap is to be able to have companies use the AI without having a lot of AI expertise.
So, and when you say AI on tap, you're talking about like beer, where you pull the tap and it comes out.
Yeah, or like water, or like electricity. Like I can have an electric device, I just plug it into into a socket. Mm-hmm. If I want to have intelligence on this cup, if I want to have vision or speech, right? If I want to be able to talk to something, I shouldn't have to develop that from scratch. Right. And of course, a lot of these tech companies are trying to sell that to you, and this is the way to go, and we will get there. Having said that, right now that is still not quite the case, right? You can't. There's very little real plug and play for AI at this point. So we have, the goal is right. We'll get there, but it's going to be much harder than giving you electricity or water or even cloud computing on tap.
Right. We have Fei Li from Google Cloud talking about this idea of democratizing AI in a couple hours. But she'll
I think there's actually, I find it very exciting change for us. So a lot of work, even in IT, had been mundane work. That's why we went offshore, just trying to get the cheapest resources possible, because things like automation, certain human tasks with macros or lower level programming just required, we need clever people, but required a lot of labor. I think some of the mundane work is going to be automated. We don't, and this applies even in manufacturing. So I started writing code and I started doing robots in Bern, Indiana. And my job was not valued because the jobs were going overseas. They don't care about, we didn't care about robots. And programmers were not respected because you could get somebody for $13 an hour, $12 an hour, $15 an hour. Well, I'm back again, baby. So, and I'm not as good anymore, but the rest of the engineers who are coming up, if we want to get really good folks who are doing really serious algorithms and development. We need it. And universities the best universities are still here, and I think they are churning out, but we need more and more of that. And then automation creates a lot of opportunities here, right? I mean, why would you make something far away and put it on a ship and bring it on if you can make it here? So I actually look at it as a very exciting opportunity where it creates more interesting things. And also, I believe humans do not want to do mundane things over and over again. We want to be seeking. We want to be doing other things with life. I just told a few people about my dad did not, I couldn't convince him to get a washing machine because he felt like the clothes were, he's 86 now, but he felt like the clothes were not clean and not hygienic if you put it in a washing machine. So we went, it was a 10-year plan to convince him to get a washing machine. And now he says, oh, it's brilliant. So I think, there are a lot of things that we still do, that I do, even with all the tech, that I find very mundane and boring, and I want to do better things. And so I think there's an exciting time when real engineering talent is going to be valued. There is a shortage, but that's a good, in a way, it's a good problem to have.
Fiona, in terms of your list of top challenges, where does finding the right talent fit in? Where would you rank it?
It's right near the top,
okay.
I would say. And it's funny, I think we talked about, I think Pedro had a student who actually was one of the first pioneering folks with us in terms of being able to apply and use machine learning and AI at Walmart. And now we're working with him and his students, right? So we're trying to do as best as we can. So yeah, certainly acquiring talent is definitely high on the list in terms of being able to bring in people that can really help us. Because again, as we talked about, we do feel that there are so many applications, there are so many ways that we could do better. And again, for us, it's really focusing on two things, right? How do you have a better experience for our customers, and then operational efficiencies, because what we want to do is, our slogan is save money, help our customers save money, live better, right? So the operational efficiencies that we can gain, that we can then invest back in pricing so that we can offer better prices for our customers. So those are the two areas that we're really focused on. And I think those are areas where machine learning and AI can really make a huge impact, right? So again, back to being able to get the right talent, people to come in and help us with that is something of paramount importance for us.
And so we talked a little bit about these operational efficiencies and how AI will drive those. The theme is innovation and how AI will change innovation. And I think it's a really difficult decision about how to even structure a company to promote innovation in an era of AI. And I'm wondering if you could share some thoughts about what that looks like. Is it about kind of trying to find an outside team who can come up with what the future of one's business will look like, completely apart from all the baggage and preconceptions that a company has? How does one properly compensate people, especially if some of these jobs are going to get automated? I'd love to hear about kind of how AI is going to impact innovation. And Pedro, let's start with you.
Innovation is more important than it's ever been, and some companies are a lot better at it than others. Even among tech companies, I'm surprised at the variety of ways in which people approach things, and some of them work more, some don't.
Could you give an example?
Yeah,
from the tech community?
I'll give you a concrete example. Google versus Amazon, right? Google and Amazon are companies that are both very good at innovation. But innovating well requires being on the edge of chaos. If you have too much order, nothing new happens. If you have too much chaos, fun stuff happens, but it doesn't go anywhere. Right? And I think, for example, Google employs a lot of brilliant people, but I think they are a little bit too much on the side of chaos. There's a lot of stuff that happens there that doesn't turn into products. Amazon is actually much more focused on the outcome. So, for example, I have a student who just went to Google. His wife works at Amazon, and he says that so they have very interesting, dinner conversations. And he says that the difference between their lives is that she spends her time worrying about what customers will make of what she does, and he spends his time wondering if there'll ever be a customer for what he does. Having said that, if you look at it from the point of view of research, people like Google a lot more than Amazon, or at least they did in the past.
You consumers?
No. The people who do research, the people, like professors, students. For example, students are much more likely to, like to go to Google than to Amazon. Because often people, and again, this has changed, in more recent years, but people had this sense that Amazon was too focused on the immediate task, which in a way is a function of their business. And again, I think when you look at how companies do innovation, it's often a function of the business that they're in. Amazon never had the margins that Google or Facebook or Microsoft had. Right. So you have to have a different point of view. So I think, but Amazon has maybe the best innovation engine of all these companies. They don't do a lot of basic research, but they try a lot of things. They may fail, they may not fail. And then when something works, right, there's really two phases to this. There's trying things with some goal in mind. And then when something works, you scale it up very quickly. And Amazon has this thing that has really worked well for them, and I think they're doing it again, for example, with health, which is be your own first customer. It's very important to know the customer. You don't know any customer better than you know yourself. For example, Amazon Web Services, right? This is actually a great example. Google should have been the winner of the cloud race. They were the ones who invented a lot of cloud technology that we use today and were ahead of everybody else. And they were doing it for their own internal consumption. They didn't really think about taking it out to other people, which of course now people like Fefe, they're doing big time. But Amazon from day one was thinking, they created AWS for their own needs, but they were thinking from day one, this is something that we're going to want to roll out to many other companies, and then and that's why they're ahead.
So the takeaway for other companies who don't necessarily have the AI talent sitting around is embrace chaos, but not too much, and think about future markets, but don't get tied to them? Or what are the kind of takeaways for broader?
I will broaden it a little bit. I think sometimes we just follow what Google is doing, or every company goes and says it's free food. It's people should wear jeans. They should just stay at home. So there's a lot of form before substance goes in. We choose to differentiate with what our strengths are. For example, we found that, and we live in Silicon Valley as well, where we recruit people from everybody. We found that our value systems are very important. A lot of people say we want to change the world, but really you're not really changing anything. You're making money. So what do you really do? We talk about foundation. We talk about giving and how they can participate in that. Surprisingly, very inspirational for a lot of millennials. We want to have good managers, because a lot of people want to work for good people. I used to work for managers who I thought were tough and as nails, and they'll beat the table, and I thought I learned, they tell you what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, that's not true. It'll kill you with stress over a longer time. So people want to work for good managers. They want to work for good leaders. They want to work for a company that does good things in the community. All this old-fashioned stuff you could differentiate. We do respect old people. A lot of companies you talked about don't respect people like me. After a certain age, millennials are not the only source you get innovation from.
Can you talk a little bit about how you're structuring your AI efforts? So do you have an AI research center that you funded at either Dell or VMware?
It's always associated to a business value, because I think we are not a monopoly like a Bell Labs or somebody used to be, where you can afford to. You make so much money somewhere that you could have a university. So we have partnership with universities for the AI and research. But it's always associated with the business purpose, to say, how are we going to make our products better for our customers? You also want to think that the other way we want to differentiate is we want to be intelligent and useful for our customers, but not be creepy. I think you can do a lot of things in AI and not be creepy, and that you can differentiate. So we want to put it close to the business, close to the customer. That's where it starts. And then, we do try to get new blood from other places, but if you create this class of people who are specialists in AI and the rest of them are the slow class, you can't change the company. You could probably get 1 or 2 results faster, but the transformation has to be, the whole company has to be high speed. So if you create this caste system within a company to say, these are the cool kids and they're going to do research, and the rest of them are going to work mundane things, the company, it's my belief. So how do you transfer? So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is you want to get some new way of thinking. And, so luckily Dell has people in VMware and other companies in Silicon Valley and other kind of places. So how can we inject some blood into it? But the trick is you want to change, and there are goodness in the traditional companies as well. So how do you take all this and move forward is probably a bigger challenge, and what most normal companies would face is, how does a bank, which is based out of Midwest, transform? Or New York transform. We all cannot be Silicon Valley companies.
Right.
But you want to think and work like a startup. I think that's a more interesting challenge and more intellectual challenge than let's just cut somebody loose, form a place, and hire kids and call it AI research.
So just changing directions, one more question for you, and then I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. So please, there will be mics floating around. My question is, what do you think is the biggest impact that AI is going to have on either business or innovation that is being lost from either the media coverage of AI or from discussions that people may be underestimating? So let's put a 5-year mark on it. So something that we're going to see in the next 5 years from AI. And Fiona, can I start with you?
Yeah, no, I think, again, for us, the way we use AI and application of it is very focused on retail and the customer experience. So if I think about it, with the customer experience, it's how do you how do you allow them to have an amazing customer experience for the things that they actually do want to buy, do enjoy shopping, right? So if you think about virtual reality, augmented reality, and everything else that could potentially come out of that, how do you create this very immersive shopping experience that we maybe don't even really know could exist for the things that you actually do want to spend your time shopping? And then for the other things that you don't, how do you, and then some of this already, we're already doing some of that, right? But how do you enable customers to just have what they need without them having to even shop, right? So maybe at two ends of the spectrum, again, we're going to always be focused on the customer experience and the shopping experience, potentially having AI be able to allow us to do that, right? How do you have an amazing shopping experience and not even need a shopping experience? So those are things I think that we're looking at. Back to your other question is we do actually have an innovation hub that we started up, Store 8, where they're focused on 5 to 10 year out research and AI, but really, again, very specific to the retail space, because we are the world's biggest retailer. We think of AI, we want to embrace it. We have gone through a digital transformation. We're a data-driven company, so that it enables us to use it, but it's really very focused still on how do we use retail, how do we apply it to retail, back to the saving money, living better, and so that's been our focused area.
Okay.
I think business transformation, so the business models would change. Let me give an example. Again, you're going to ask me how you did this, and if I explain it, it wouldn't look cool. But I was an aerospace company, and we could never predict our quarter. We would either blow the quarter by millions of dollars or miss it by millions of dollars. And we always got into trouble with our group CEO of the company, saying, you got no handle on this. So we fixed it. We fixed it so we can hit the number on the thing all the time. With, at that time we called it data analytics, big data. Now it's like AI with the algorithms that we did. So if I explained to you how, we changed the model. So we looked at the data and found that we couldn't really figure out when companies would buy, turbochargers for planes, and we couldn't predict with accuracy if Lufthansa would buy a turbocharger. They could push it out by a quarter. When could you change the brake pads on your plane? They could buy it early, depending on their financial stuff, right? So we will miss a quarter. Next quarter, we'll get a whole bunch of order from another aerospace company. What we did was change the business model. We're going to do it as a service. So we're going to call Lufthansa and say, we will take over by landing. Number of times we'll change your turbo, we'll change your brakes, so you don't have to order anything from us. We just go as a service. So now you can just watch.
Your prediction is that companies are going to get better at.
They're going to get better. So you have business models like that. Then you say, let's change the business model instead of selling me something. I'll just service your brake pads for the rest of your life, and then it becomes predictable, right? So I think that is the insight that AI is going to give, where I can watch and say, if I just change it, I know the customer behavior. If I change this will be more useful for them and be more predictable or more useful for me. I think that is what we should explore.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Pedro, what's your prediction?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think the biggest and most decisive application of AI is actually going to be something that I haven't seen any stories in the media about, which is information integration. Information integration, according to Gartner, is where Fortune 500 spend more than half of their entire IT budget. Right? It's a very boring problem, which is why maybe it's not sexy, so people don't think about it a lot. It's also a problem that is very unintuitive for people, because we humans do it very well, which is, I'm a big bank. I have 30,000 databases. I can't query across them. Companies don't know what they know. If only they knew what they knew, right? And this problem is tailor-made for AI, and in particular for machine learning. This is actually what Enhai was working on for his PhD thesis, who then became chief scientist of Walmart. We can use machine learning to figure out, when someone is saying this, here's what they mean over here. It's like learning to translate between languages by living in the country, right? A big company these days is like a Tower of Babel of systems that don't work together and are perennially in danger of falling apart. And I think how intelligent companies can be is actually limited by this. I think the future of companies is to have like these worldwide brains where the right information gets to the right place for the right decisions. We need to solve the integration problem for that to happen, but I think we have the tools to do that. In fact, it doesn't even take some great new technology. It's just not that widespread yet, but I think it's going to be a decisive one.
Okay. But I can see why it's not on the front page of newspapers.
Exactly.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to questions.
My name is Brent Leland. I'm part of a group called Advancing AI Wisconsin. and we're basically raising awareness about AI in Wisconsin. And it's a question for you, Pedro. So I find myself presenting on this topic quite a bit, and I sense there's a lot of confusion around what is an algorithm, what does training mean, and they say it takes an expert to explain something simply, and you wrote a book called The Mastery Algorithm. So maybe you could kind of help really demystify what that means.
Yeah, that's actually, when I go on like radio or TV, usually the first question I get is like, so what is an algorithm? And I have 30 seconds to explain, and I know if I don't do that well, then the rest of it is, not going to work. Before I wrote the book, I actually went and checked, does the word algorithm appear in the New York Times? But it actually does, even in the title. What I found, though, is that people have a very fuzzy notion of what an algorithm is. An algorithm at heart is something that we all know. When we learn to do addition in primary school, that's an algorithm. We could use a different algorithm to do addition, right? So it's, or multiplication, or when you use a formula, in a spreadsheet, that's an algorithm. Any sequence of steps that very precisely says you need to execute this to accomplish the goal is an algorithm. A lot of things that people use as analogies for algorithms, like recipes, they're algorithm-like, but they're a little too fuzzy to really be algorithms. So people often think of algorithms as what computers do. The important thing about an algorithm is that the algorithm is independent of the details. You know what the task is, you know what the set of steps is that you want to execute, and that's an algorithm. The power of machine learning, of course, is that you don't have to explain to the computer what the steps are. It figures out the steps by itself by observing people. And now the question, of course, is how powerful that can be, and, and we're in the process of finding out.
Hi, I'm Allison Bishop. I'm with Edelman, a global marketing and communications firm. I have a question for all of you. Bask has mentioned briefly about the importance of inclusion in terms of developing algorithms, and there's a need for training up the workforce to enable AI. What I'm curious about is your opinion on how AI will impact lower-skilled workers and where there's opportunity for AI to lift up and empower them in positive ways.
Yeah, so let me start since I opened that can of worms. I think it's not all just IQ. It's not just all IQ. I think you can differentiate by doing better customer service. I'm going to come back and say, I have a human doing a customer service for you. Where everybody else chooses to just use AI and chatbots and so on, we have actual humans doing it. It's just what you don't want humans to do is really, things that are mind-numbing. Because this is my belief, and I may be wrong, is that everybody wants to do better than what they were doing yesterday, right? So if you can remove the mind-numbing jobs of searching, finding all this information, that is taken care of it. I'd still like to talk to a human and say, listen, I'm still frustrated that I bought this equipment from you and this is not what I hear. So I think there are always room for those kind of folks, and we need people who can have customer skills, people skills, and other kind of stuff. We still need people to, if you move factories here, maybe you don't have the factories like we hit it before, where we have 80,000 people churning something, but you still need at least 20,000 people once the factory is here. If you don't have any robot here or any automation, then you don't even have a factory here to start off with, right? So I'm more of the optimistic on it. And the more important thing is we as a society have to figure it out. We can't just take the attitude, we should ask that question. We can't take the attitude of, well, just get smart, just learn programs, learn algorithms. I mean, that's sometimes the arrogance we have even in Silicon Valley, and we should think a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, I think certainly, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of it's around automating tasks, and you mentioned mundane work or tasks that are sort of monotonous, right? And allowing the humans, the associates, to be able to serve the customer. A lot of it's just, people actually still do go to the stores, right? As evidenced by 150 million shopping every week at a Walmart. People do still like to go to the stores, and a lot of that is, and when they're in the stores, is if the associates are freed up from some of the tasks that potentially the robot can do a little better, that are more mundane, they can actually be the ones that are there that can greet the customers and ask them, how's your day going? How can I help you? These are things where before it was really tough for them to do because they're busy counting cans on the shelf, for example, right? So I think that's what we're focused on, is how do we provide some of the information or to our associates so that they can focus better on sort of human tasks, right? The humanity of being able to serve a customer and make a difference in a customer's life.
How do you think it affects overall employment figures? Do you think that it will show up in cuts to the workforce? Because ultimately we will, while we can't see robots yet placing things on the shelves, as you say. There's still that gap in technical know-how. Ultimately, that will be solved. So will that evidence itself in cuts, or do you think it will just mean that you don't grow your workforce as quickly as you might have? So it ultimately it just shows up in new jobs not being created.
Yeah, I think it is going to be different jobs and different skills, right? I would say that, honestly, if you go to a store today, a lot of times you're running around trying to find an associate, right? Or you're trying, and so there's still a lot of room for the automation and some of this intelligent automation to take place so that we can actually have the associates be present to do the tasks that we would like them to do, right? So I think there's still a lot of room, frankly, over there, just in terms of being able to service our customers even with the associate base that we do have. So I don't really see it so much yet, or in terms of taking away jobs. It's just moving around, the different job functions so that we can kind of focus more on being able to serve the customers.
Okay, thank you. And Pedro, did you want to take that on?
Yeah, I think this is, of course, a very salient issue. But in my view, what's going to happen, at least in the foreseeable future, is that AI is going to create more jobs than it destroys. Because what AI is making intelligence cheaper. If intelligence is cheap, imagine all the things that you can now do with it that you couldn't think before. We always have an easier time picturing jobs that disappear than the ones that appear. 200 years ago, everybody was a farmer. Today, almost nobody is, and we don't have 99% unemployment, right? We just have jobs that you couldn't even imagine 100 years ago. So I think we're going to see certain job categories will decrease, but there'll be all sorts of new jobs that people aren't even imagining. There'll also be a lot of demand, new demand for old jobs, like maybe there'll be fewer truckers, but goods are cheaper, people have more money, they buy bigger houses, there's more demand for construction workers.
And what's one of the jobs of the future that we might not be anticipating right now?
I'll give you an example. Today, the bottleneck, as we were talking about, is people who know how to program computers. As computers become better at understanding natural language, everybody will be able to program a computer. You don't need to know programming languages anymore. You can just explain to the computer what you want it to do. And if today we have tens of millions of people who are app developers, right, which didn't exist 10 years ago, tomorrow every one of us, 10 billion, will potentially be someone who creates new programs, new AI systems, and then if they work, they spread to everybody else.
I like it. We'll end on a very optimistic note.